Okay, so now let's do the fat quarter bundle block. So I'm sure you've noticed on the quilt and in the pattern that there's a different amount of fat quarter bundles in each block. This is the smallest one. This row is all sewn the same. These are all sewn the same. That's just a longer ribbon and more stacks. And then you just add a piece of background at the top if needed. I need this one at 3.5 inches tall so that it will end up being the same size as the other blocks. So the construction is just the same. I'm just going to show you one block. So I've sewn the easy corner triangles on both sides of these rectangle pieces, and then one on each side of the fabric. So now I can sew these end pieces on the little tie. And yes, I'm going to press these seams open as well. Some are easier than others, but it all works. Okay, so bring it back over here. Turn them around, and now I can sew them together. I'm going to start on the top here instead of down here so that I know these are lined up perfectly to a nice point. And before I take that out and press it, I'm going to go ahead and start sewing these together. So and the same on this side. Okay. Add my little stopper square. Okay, over to the ironing board. So that little row is complete if you have the tallest blocks, but again, this is the shortest one, so this piece will need to go at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that, keeping the pieced section on top and facing up so that I can make sure I don't sew over any points, make sure the fabric meets where it needs to. I always like the clickety-click sound of the featherweight. It's one of my favorite sounds. Okay, so that top section is complete. I just let that sit there and cool, flatten it out, and I'll press these now. Okay, so after you've pressed these, you need to lay them back out on the board. The secret is laying them out how they were. Okay, that's the order. This one goes on top. You have to make sure the same fabric goes across. Okay. That one goes on that side. And that one lines up there. Okay, so now I'm going to take this little ribbon section and sew to there, but I'm going to put these seams up so that I can keep in control of my seams and where they go. Just felt like this shifted a little bit. There we go. Okay. Okay, so you might really be tempted to press this towards just the ribbon part, and that would be okay if I weren't putting this piece on top of it with seams. It just seems to help if it's all open. Bigger blocks, sometimes I pick and choose which seams are open and which are pressed towards one side, but small blocks I always do open. Okay, so now I just need to sew this side to this side, but I'm going to pin this because I want to make sure that these seams right here all match up the best that I can. I can't tell that just by sewing it here. I need to make sure they all match. So I'm going to start it first before I pin it. And then I'm actually just going to take a pin and right here line everything up straight across before I stick that pin in. And I'm only going to work with one pin at a time. Just going to get to that point and line that up again. Sometimes I find with these little patchwork, if you put a lot of pins in the intersection, it just kind of pulls your block up close and you kind of end up sewing a bunchy seam and it ends up being a little bit shorter than you wanted. So that's why I like to do one pin at a time and just do my best to match it up straight across. And you'll just do it the same way with when you're adding more fat quarter rows on it for your bundle for your taller blocks. I just pull it out right before I sew it. You can sew over, I just don't find it necessary on this block. Okay, so now we're going to open it up and see if it looks like they're straight across from each other. And I think it looks great. I'm going to go ahead and press. Give that whole center a good press. And now I can add this top little piece that adds the tie. After these blocks are quilted, I like to add a little button right there in the intersection that matches the fabrics. So on this one, I want to make sure that that tie goes right in the center of this strip, just like that. So again, I'm going to grab a pin. I'm using a double pin. And then I can go ahead I really like to take my time and make sure that, you know, I'm not running over anything, that my seams are still open. And I can see my needle just goes right into that point, so I don't chop it off. Now that I've got past the center point, I just need to worry about the ends matching up. Put my last stopper square in. I'm going to open it up. Make sure that is right in the center where I want it. And now I can press. Again, I usually just use the side of my iron to kind of open it up first. And since the iron covers more than one seam, I like to repress if I have to. And I don't do it very often, but you can turn it over and press from the front, but I just find that it's not really necessary, and sometimes by doing that you just press creases into it where you didn't want them in the first place. So I find it's a lot easier to just lay them out on my design board with the seams open. Put my ruler down, something heavy, and let it cool nice and flat.